are ready, let's go ahead and you take it away.
Great. Thanks very much, Kim. Thanks very much for your time today. I'm excited to be able to share this particular group of tips with you. The title of this one, Do Your Homework, 30 Things That You Might Not Know About Dynamics GP Functionality, was actually originally delivered in a live format, and so we had the opportunity to sort of get some feedback as we went along. And so I'm going to tell you how this one will work, where we're doing it in a recorded webinar format here in just a second. So Kim really already introduced me, so I won't spend much time here other than say that a large part of my focus recently has been in the mixed mode manufacturing and distribution verticals. So I very much enjoy that kind of additional functionality on top of the ERP accounting kinds of details within our GP systems. I do currently make my home in Austin, Texas. So in terms of format, we won't have time to demo all 30 tips, so we're going to go through some slides. We're going to look at screenshots of some of the tips that we're talking about. I would like to encourage you to take notice in the upper right-hand corner of each one of the slides is the tip number that we're covering. And if you would send to Kim in the questions box any of the tips that you think you really want to make sure that we cover at the end as a part of the demo, then she'll help me tally those. Now we are going to take some of them that we already knew wanted to be covered by the previous group of people that we did this webinar content with. So we will be covering about 6 or 8 of them by default because that's the ones that were requested at that point. So we'll be comparing those to see that we cover those as well as some of the additional ones that you might choose. Okay, so take note of the particular tip number in the right-hand corner. And we are going to be highlighting some of the new features of GP 2016 as a part of the tips, so you might want to consider the value to your organization in upgrading to this new version. So the slide that I have showing at this point is about our objectives. We're going to be kind of fast and furious. We have a lot to cover in a single hour, but I did break these tips up into specific topics. So there's homework resources, right? Where do you learn how to do that homework? Where do you get your crib notes from? Where do you get your documentation from? Then GP ease of use, information you can use that's specific to you, repeatability, data access, and then module-specific quickies. Okay, so here we go. Tip number 1. You may remember as a child your parents saying, do your homework. Well, this homework assignment gives you the crib notes so that you can take it with you and refer back to as you progress through your GP experiences and show off to others with your newfound expertise. So our first reference here is how to find those GP manuals that may need to be referred to on occasion. So, did you know that GP ships with manuals still? So those manuals are a part of what you get in your GP installation. Now every single manual is not included. Some of the additional higher level ones like manufacturing and project accounting are not included in there, but the basic printable manuals are available for you. Tip number 2, again in homework resources. So the GP help is a great way to be able to get some information about the window that you're on. So when you're doing your homework, it's not just the best. Isn't it not just the best when you can find that you can target the specific area you need help with in a very simple way and then dig deeply into that topic so that you can have the details that you need when you're ready to process something or proceed with clicking a button? Well, the GP help is the right resource for that. Right down to the descriptions of the fields. Help can be accessed from a variety of places, but looks the same wherever you begin. Everybody recognize that symbol for that blue circle with the question mark in it? Tip number 3, again, this one we're switching topics. This is the GP ease of use topic. Choosing your industry in your select homepage roles allows you to include or exclude functionalities that you may or may not relate to your job. So for instance, if you're not a manufacturer, then you have no need to see some of the manufacturing specific extended windows for item maintenance. So your role selection narrows the security to tasks that you might perform based on general understanding of the roles that you choose within that window. Tip number 4, GP ease of use topic. From to-dos to typical reports, from Microsoft content to community interactions, your home page can be just what you need in order to get the lay of the land to start your day and keep updated throughout your day. So new versions also allow you to see workflow alerts for tasks you need to take action on, or even update your own W-9 details and print pay stubs if you're using payroll HR. Also, you can add Power BI details using a new web part that was added in GP 2016. Tip number 5. GP 2016 allows you to copy your home and area pages. Why should you care? Well, when was the last time that you had a GP accounting clerk leave your organization and then need the new person to have the exact same links and security as the person who left? After all, a lot of the notes and documentation that we do for a particular person in their role often references quick links and things that are specific to the way you set up that person's home and area pages. So this feature helps you to have a duplicate available to support the new person that's in that new role or in that role, and keeps things processing effectively in your organization. Tip number 6, staying with GP ease of use. Navigation lists are relatively underused. Did you know that you can take action on a number of records at the same time and select the records from a list that you want that action to apply to? Another common use of navigation lists is as a workflow. So if your shipping department might want to see a list of all the orders that are ready to be shipped, all the other steps prior to shipment has taken place on this group of orders, so they fit a list of criteria and show up on a navigation list, then your shipping department can take action and refresh the list so that when you look at the list, you're always seeing the work that needs to be done currently. So here's a little quick tip for you. When you're creating custom navigation lists, which you can do, you can save them first and then customize the saved new list. Tip number 7. Another GP 2016 feature is the ability to access MR or Management Reporter reports directly from GP. So imagine how much easier to run routine reports, no need to launch another application as a starting point of report generation. So these would be reports that had already been generated within Management Reporter, but you have the ability to be able to go refresh the data and rerun them right here from GP. Tip number 8 under GP ease of use. GP 2016 comes with the ability to scan multiple pages for document attachments. So note that you must have a scanner with a multi-page feeder to be able to scan in multiple pages, but it is possible for you to scan multiple pages together into a single attachment with GP 2016. Tip number 9, the default Smart List visibility. So when you're creating a new Smart List favorite, the system administrators now have the option to be able to select a default value for to whom the Smart List favorite will be visible, including the following. You can have system, company, user class, or user ID. So there's much less clutter in the Smart Lists and that makes available to system when they're only needed by an individual user. Tip number 10. We're switching topics now. We're going to the information that you can use that's specific to you. So custom reminders are where we're going to start, so you can create those from a custom Smart List favorite or while creating a new Smart List favorite. So by choosing that Add or Remove Favorites, click the Add button. You can add the favorite and the reminder all at the same time. Tip number 11 under information that you can use. Have you ever asked the question, who did that? Who took that action? How can I know who to train so that this doesn't continue to be a repeated issue? Who changed that item description? Who changed that customer name? So here's how. You'll want to carefully select what you want to turn this on for, though, because it will fill up your database with tracking of activities that are not useful to know if you turn it on for too many different kinds of fields. So I've also included the navigation there. This is one of the tips that we'll take a look at in practice as we get to the end of our slide deck here. Tip number 12, information you can use that's specific to you. Did you know that you can send your GP users a message from within the application? How handy is that? Tip number 13, and again we're changing our topic. We're looking at repeatability now, things that you can do that make your GP application a repeatable kind of a process. And the first one we're talking about here is creating GL accounts. So the descriptions can pre-populate if you name the GL segments, so that in that account segment setup, if you put a description in that segment setup, those descriptions in your GL accounts can pre-populate. And you can have the posting type of typical balance and category and so forth pre-populate if you look up a similar GL account number first in your account maintenance window, click the Save button, and then go on to creating the next one that has similar features. Tip number 14, setting up shortcuts. So the fastest way to set up shortcuts on your GP homepage is by using the File button on the toolbar or the ribbon. So I've highlighted in that screenshot where you can go to File and then Add to Shortcuts on any window that you choose. How very File Explorer-like, very, very Microsoft-like. Again, within repeatability, tip number 15, you can add keyboard shortcuts to any window in GP. So there are lots of people who still like to be able to use both hands, one hand on the keyboard and the other on the mouse, and they can use the keyboard shortcuts to add to any window. And there are lots of keystroke combinations that you can choose from to make keying data entry even more streamlined. Tip number 16 in repeatability, customizing the toolbar. So a simple right-click to the toolbar gives you access to add images and or text for the windows you need access to most often. Smart List is a common one to add to the toolbar. And the benefit of having the link on the toolbar is that it's available regardless of which area page you happen to be working on. Tip number 17 in repeatability. Do you have a need to further restrict your users to keep accidental events from causing headache fixes? Making a button invisible to users, as in this example of hiding the delete button, can aid users in making the right selections. I do want to point out that this is not available in the GP web client. So as of 2015, there's a web client available to us, and this kind of work is not available in those windows, in that application, that method of accessing. Tip number 18 is based on data access. So we're changing topics. We're looking at data access. So from within GP, you have access to all the table structure details you have installed. So with a number of different filter options and sorting choices, you can easily find the details you need for use in SmartList designing, SQL querying, SQL view creating, etc. Additionally, you can print the list to the screen and use the Control F to find on specific words. So if you're not quite sure what table you're looking for, you can always print it to the screen, use that Control F keyboard shortcut, and be able to find the information that you're looking for regarding tables. Again, in data access, tip number 19, a number of new features that are available in GP 2015 are to make upgrading very worthwhile. The accounting minds will love the reality that debits will now be represented before credits in the core SmartList without you having to rearrange the columns manually. No more alphabetical columns. Now they're in accounting accurate representation. And I want to point out that this actually is stored in the SQL tables in this debit prior to credit. So it's not just within representing the SmartList, it's actually stored that way within the SQL database in many of the tables. Tip number 20, again in data access. With GP 2016, you can export a designed SmartList from a GP company and or install and import it into a different GP company. Imagine what that's going to save us in terms of time and having to design the same reports in multiple companies. You can export it out, it goes out as an XML file, and then you can import it into any other company within your database. Tip number 21 in data access. SmartList to Excel number formats. Can you believe how long it's taken for us to get this feature right? So GP 2016, you can now export numbers from SmartList columns into Excel, and they arrive as number formats instead of text. Now these are ones that are held in GP formats as currency, so you don't have to worry about things like your Social Security numbers coming out in a format that has decimal places. It really only is impacting the ones that are currency. Tip number 22. And now we're into our module-specific quickies. So we're going to start with purchasing. So in the purchasing module, it is possible to have multiple AP distributions by default on a vendor. So I'm going to demonstrate this one as well when we get to our demonstration phase of our webinar, and I'll show you how the first line takes all the distribution, but the other account numbers actually do show up in there so that you could potentially use those as a way to distribute across multiples. I also want to mention that there isn't a defined fixed allocation for these, so if your intention is to roll this out to a defined allocation account, you'd want that at your first level on your vendor account maintenance window. Module specific on purchasing still for tip number 23. There's a great new feature that is in GP 2015 R2. Now you can actually validate that your payment terms that you set up will have the impact that you intend before you need to provide them the accurate information with your vendors and customers that they're assigned to. So that ability to be able to calculate, which is the button on the top ribbon there, opens the second window where you can see if you put in a transaction date, when the due date will be, when the discount will be, and what the discount amount will be based on that date. So you can test it out and make sure that it's really going to give you the information that you're looking for. Still within purchasing, tip number 24. The received not invoiced report has existed within the GP reports for some time. But who wants to stop all your processing on the first day of the next month in order to run the month-end received not invoiced report in GP? No one. So there's a new SSRS report that's available that gives you the opportunity to enter a date parameter, making it a historical report. So here's another question for you. Have you deployed the out-of-the-box SSRS reports? There are lots more of them than this available. Tip number 25 in purchasing. Prepayments on POs have been available for a couple of versions. However, with GP 2016, a new feature resolves the issue that a prepayment could not in the past be inclusive of freight and miscellaneous charges. So where I've highlighted the freight and there on that purchase order entry window, that in the past could not be included in my prepayment value, but as of GP 2016, freight, miscellaneous, and tax can now be included in the prepayment so that that can encompass the entire amount of your purchase order. Tip number 26, staying in purchasing. Payables credit card payments. So, are you collecting credit card points? Do you want to pay your AP with the company credit card and rack up the points for your vacation? Now, with GP 2016, there is an option for you to use the company credit card to pay a payables check run. Single checks or multiples, it's just however many are in the batch. This has the same functionality as a single credit card payment, thereby showing a transaction for the total amount of the batch as a voucher on the credit card vendor. Module specific, now we're switching over to sales. This is tip number 27. GP 2015 R2 came on the scene with the ability to skip a second step when processing cash receipts by auto-depositing those into the checkbook. But in that case, it was only a transaction-by-transaction deposit. So if you did one cash receipt, it was a single deposit into your bank account. So with GP 2016, the auto deposit feature was enhanced to be able to allow an entire batch of cash receipts becomes a single deposit into your bank account. So great new functionality there to be able to put an entire deposit together in a batch and have a single deposit on your checkbook transactions. Tip number 28 in sales, customer credit limit indicators. So GP 2016 has enhanced the visibility for customers over their credit limit by making it quite obvious to users who need to be made aware. So there's several places that caution sign will show up, not just when someone is doing the sales transaction entry. So in the sales transaction entry, you have the choice of being able to either have the old banner that has been in GP for some time that says the customer is over their credit limit, and or you can have both, and or you can have this caution sign that shows up on the customer as well. The caution sign actually shows up in a number of other different windows, including some inquiries as well, so that you'd be able to see that. And for those of you who are attending this webinar, you get a little bit of a sneak peek into GP 2016 R2, which is slated for release the end of this year, around the 1st of December. I'm also hearing that in that 2016 R2 version that it will actually start to take into consideration any cash receipts that are unposted that would bring your customer back down under their credit limit, so that you really get an even better picture of where your customer currently stands in terms of their credit and the ability to place a new order. Tip number 29, we're switching modules now. We're looking at financial. It's no longer necessary to open different windows to query the GL account activity from the current year or a prior historical year. So as of GP 2015 R2, they are all in one window, and any go-tos or drillbacks also go to a single window as well. Tip number 30, the grand finale. So I am really happy about these all-in-one viewers. So the purchasing all-in-one viewer was first on the scene, and it was out with GP 2015. But with 2016, you have access to sales, inventory, and purchasing, as all of them. These are a great way to see across the landscape of your entire entry without having to open multiple windows to do so. There are several filters that allow you to restrict the document types or specific documents, and you can begin with the sales quote or begin with the customer payment, and you can access the all-in-one viewers from a variety of different windows, area pages, and navigation lists. So in the slide that I have showing there, the all-in-one viewer could be accessed for that specific item by clicking on the all-in-one view button on the item maintenance window. Okay, that's 30 tips. We got through that in about half of the time that we have available for our webinar. So I'm going to jump over now, and the first ones that I'll walk through again are the ones that our previous live version of this content thought would be the most useful to them, starting with tip number 5. Let me jump over here to my GP. Sorry, I neglected to get that OK button before we got on our webinar. Give it just a second here. Okay, tip number 5 was in our GP ease of use, and the tip was how to copy the home and area pages from one user to another. So again, this is GP 2016 functionality. I am demonstrating to you from GP 2016. So I'm going to start out with my administration page. And I'm going to go to in the setup section, set up a user. If I created a new user today, I can copy the settings using the button here at the top. Guess I'll give him a password. So at the top here, I have the ability to be able to have the security access copied from a single user to another. So I'll take that from my workflow user. Actually, I'll use my BMI user. Then at the next section, I have the ability to be able to copy the home page and the area pages. And once I check any or all of those boxes, I could choose to copy that from the same user or even any other user. So I may want to choose my home page and area pages from a different user than the BMI user that I'm creating and copying my access and security from. And click OK. So at the point at which that user now is created, that Thursday user now would have access to the same things in terms of home page, area page, and also security as my BMI user has. Okay, that was tip number 5. The next one that we found that was widely requested for demonstration was under GP ease of use again. It was tip number 7. And this one was how to access those MR reports from within GP. So again, I'm here on my administration area page, and on my navigation pane on the side here, I have an option for Management Reporter Reports. So when I click on that, it opens the navigation list for Management Reporter reports that have been generated that are available to me. Now these definitely are security driven, so if you haven't given someone access to it through your security, they shouldn't be able to see these reports. You'd be able to see them through this and then be able to select those reports and generate them. You can view them and print them right here in this navigation list. Okay. The next one that we're going to talk about is again under GP ease of use. It was tip number 9, and that's the default smart list visibility. Okay, so I'm going to jump back to my home page just as a starting place. I can go to Administration Area page, into the Setup section, and I'm going to be under System and System Preferences. So this little caret here is a toggle switch, so you'd want to expand System and go down to the bottom and choose System Preferences. If you have assigned a password to your system, you would need to enter that password, which helps keep that secure. And here in the center section, I have options to enable, to default the smart list visibility and whom to default it to. So I have set my system preferences to default to a user ID as opposed to system, which is the standard default. Then I'll click OK. And if I were to go to my smart list, which I have added to my toolbar here at the top, if I click on smart list and open that up, and I'll go into my purchasing and into vendors. I'll choose one of the standard ones. And if I made a change to this, so for instance, if I add a column of information like whether or not it's on hold, they're on hold. Then if I go to favorites, that visible to should be showing user ID as opposed to system. So not sure what happened with that, but by changing the default, it should come up to user ID, not to system. Then I can add that as a favorite, or I can add that as a favorite and a reminder. I would want to change my title. So that I had an indication of who it was, and then add that favorite. So I'm not quite sure why that didn't work, but that's the intent of it. Okay. The next tip that we're going to do in demonstration is tip number 11. So tip number 11 was in the information that you can use that's specific to you, and it's based on the activity tracking. So there's some setup to be done. The setup we're going to be on the administration area page again, under Setup, and we choose Activity Tracking. So there's several different activity types that you can track, including whether someone is logging in and logging out, right? You can also do file tracking, which is what we would have chosen to that clearing out of files, right? You can indicate when they're adding to master files, adding to setup files. You can track those various different things. You can mark several of them and unmark several things. You can choose the company that it applies to, and you can also choose the user that it applies to. So a variety of different things show up in this activity list based on the activity type that you choose, right? If you want to know who's posting things, you can see who's been posting things and so forth. So that activity tracking. There is a inquiry window, so once you get this set up and start seeing some activities being tracked, you can also view those results in the inquiry pane of this same administration area page under activity tracking. Where I'd be able to, in this window, see the activities, who had taken action, the date and time that they had taken action, and you can apply some filters to that based on the different activity types and the activities that are within those types. So you can view those, and you also then, with that activity tracking, also lastly have an option for a report. In the general, oops. The activity tracking setups and activity tracking details are all within this window, so you could create a report out of this as you need to be able to send to someone, or to be able to make record of that for future reference. Okay, so that was the activity tracking. Our next tip is tip number 12. Again, information that you can use that's specific to you. This one is about sending users a message. So still on my administration page, under the utilities this time, in System, I have Send Users a Message. So I can choose to send all users or any users a message. I can type the message here. It can be a notification message or a task with a reminder. And what the user would see is a flag on their GP screen that gives them this message. Okay. That's tip number 12. The next one that we're going to take a look at is tip number 15, which is about repeatability and how to add keyboard shortcuts to any of the shortcuts that you want to be able to access. So I'm going to jump back to my home page, and I'm going to go to Cards, Purchasing Vendor, and I'll just create a shortcut using my Tools, file, Add to Shortcuts. So my vendor maintenance window is over here now. I'm going to right-click on the vendor maintenance shortcut that I created and go to Shortcut Properties. So that shortcut to vendor maintenance, if I wanted to add a keyboard shortcut to be able to click on my F12 button to open the vendor maintenance window, and then click OK. Now when I click the F12 button on my keyboard, it automatically opens the vendor maintenance window. Okay. So that was tip number what was that? Tip number 15. Next one, tip number 17 is under repeatability, and it's about field level security. So we're going back to our administration page. We're spending a fair amount of time here, aren't we? Under Setup and System, I'm going to go to Field Level Security. So this window gives us the ability to be able to choose whether we're going to apply this based on users, users and classes, classes of users, right? Then we can determine the particular user we want it to apply to. We can determine the specific company we want it to apply to, and then we can indicate yes or no whether that action will be taken. I'm going to go ahead and open that up. This was one that I already created, where you would give it an ID, give it a description, and then you have some things to do. So looking for the product ID, so you would click on the looking glass and look for the specific product that you wanted this to apply to. So keep in mind then that anything that you have in your set file could have these added to them, because any of the products should be able to show up here in this list. So if you have ISV or third-party products, you can do the same kind of field level security with those as we would with the GP product. Then you look for the specific form. So in my case, I was hiding the delete button on the vendor maintenance window. And then the security mode is telling it what I want to do. So in my case, again, I was hiding the field that was the delete button. Notice that you do have the option to be able to add a password to that if you wanted to, so that people who actually needed to delete could use that password if what you were having them do is a security mode other than hide. So password before, password after, you can lock the field and then have a password applied and so forth. Notice also that we have a copy button on the toolbar. So if you created one of these and you wanted to hide that delete on also the customer maintenance window, you could copy this, change the form name, and you would have a second one that you could use that was hiding that delete button from your customers in the same way that you had it from your vendors. Okay. I think we'll do one more, and then Kim will be coming back to you to see what other ones people might want to be seeing. So I'll give you a little advance warning there. We'll come back to you in just a couple of minutes here. So the next one that I wanted to point out based on feedback was tip number 22, which is in the purchasing module, how multiple AP distributions by default. So I'm going to change to my purchasing area page. And I'll open up my vendor. I'll just take the Advanced Office Systems. And if I go to the Accounts button, so typically we put our purchases accounts here on this line. That will be what defaults into any payable transactions. But over here on this same line is this three little dots button. We call that an ellipse. When I click on that ellipse button, I can add as many additional accounts as I choose to, and then I can mark this checkbox to default those on transactions. So I'll leave these windows open. We'll come back to take a look at those here in just a second, and I'm going to go over into my transactions, and I'm going to do a transaction entry to the Advanced Office. And when I go to my distributions, you'll notice that the first one, the first account that was on my vendor account information was the 500-6150-00, and so it put that in the first place on my distribution window and distributed the entire $1,000 to that. However, the additional fields that I had off my ellipse button were the 400 and the 300 department for the same main account segment, and I have those now showing on this window, so I could easily be reminded that I needed to distribute some of this to other accounts. So I could change this to 500 and then fill in the balance of 250 on this one and 250 on this one. I'll validate that my debits and my credits total each other and then click OK, and I have now very simply reminded my accounts payable person to distribute to those other departments while staying within the same main account number. So that was tip number 22. Okay, Kim?
Yes, can you hear me now?
I can.
All right. Okay, so I've been watching as people have been typing in as you're going. I listen to directions, which is super. Only hard part is they all listed as one time. So I do have one question. Maybe we should hit that one first
Okay.
and then go from there. So the first question is, can the keyboard shortcut be used on web pages and Excel spreadsheets that I've added as quick links to my home page?
Yes, they can. So very similarly to this quick link that we have here, if what you created there was a link to an external web page, that shortcut properties list should still be there where you can add the keyboard shortcut. So yes.
Excellent. Well, that's good news. Now we've got 6 different tips, and so I'll list them for you, and maybe some of them make sense to do it in a row. So tip number 6, 8, 12, 18, 20, 27. Bingo!
Very good.
Uh,
Okay, so awesome. We already demonstrated number 12, so I'm going to take that one off my list. So we'll start at the top and get just as far as we can. So I'm going to go back to tip number 6. Let me bring up my list here so I know which one that is. Okay, tip number 6 had to do with custom navigation lists. So I would not have time in this webinar to create a custom navigation list. So I think we're going to have to take that one as a follow-up to the specific people who asked for information about 6. It does take a few minutes to create a custom navigation list. So, but I will say that within something like the purchasing module, if I go to purchase order transactions and purchase orders that are pending approvals, so this is one of the ones that I think is really hugely valuable in that someone who has been assigned a task as a part of a workflow activity could potentially come in and use this navigation list to create and approve, to review and approve all of the purchase orders that they were assigned action items to within this list. So if there were ones they needed to take action on, they'd show up in this list. They can open them up. They can choose this top button to mark all of them in the list, and then they would be able to come to the top here and approve those purchase orders that were available to be approved. Might be able to do one in here. Yep. So there would be a list of records like we have here where they can review the snippet of information at the bottom. They can choose one or all of those requisitions. They can drill back into the specific requisition, and they can mark those and then choose to approve, reject, or delegate as a part of the workflow actions. So you can kind of get an idea of how you could use this as a a workflow kind of a thing. So that was number 6. Then we're going to look at number 8. Oh, another challenging one to demo. Number 8 was the ability to scan multiple pages to attachments. So I'll have to just talk through this one a little bit. Let's see, let's go to purchasing once again, and we'll look at vendor. So on a particular vendor, there's an attach button along the ribbon, and within this attach, you have the ability to be able to, if I had a scanner attached, be able to click on the scan button and be able to scan in multiple documents directly into this attachment, and then be able to have that attached directly on here. Once there's an attachment, you can then preview that attachment by the preview button. So the new functionality is that in past versions, we would attach a file that had already been saved to a different location, perhaps in a shared file. This scan button becomes available once you have a scanner attached to your GP so that you can have that be scanned directly to the document. So we'll have to just talk through that one. Let's see, the next one you mentioned was tip number 18. Tip number 18 is about table structures within the GP. So I can go to my GP button and navigate to Tools, Resource Descriptions, and Tables. So this is where I find all of the details for those table descriptions. Again, I have this ellipse button, so I click on it as a starting place, and then I can choose the product, the series, and then how I want to view them. So I like to, when I get this far, I like to change my view by to table group so that they all group together. So these are all the ones that relate to my account master. These are account roll-ups and so forth. So it groups them together in a way that makes sense to me. Then I could potentially print that to the screen and use my Control F to look for something within that list, and it'll find the word budget, so I could find some of those additional details that it might be a little more challenging to scroll through. So that was 18. We're doing pretty good. Next one was 20. 20 is data access and is the Smart Lists company export import. So within my Smart Lists, this is in 2016. I have the ability to be able to open a Smart List and use the export import functionality. So I could export it out of this company, it puts it in an XML file, and then switch companies and do an import into that other company, and it would import that exact same accounts new Smart List that I had saved here. Okay. And then number 27. The auto batch deposit cash receipts. So in the company setup window, navigate this way, it's a little easier for me. Setup, company. On the options button, if I scroll all the way to the bottom options, this automatically post cash receipt deposits becomes available. So if you do your cash receipts in a group and you put them all into a batch, it will automatically deposit that entire batch as a single bank transaction. If you do a single transaction and post it singly with this check mark marked, it will create a single deposit for the single transaction. Okay, Kim, I think we made it. I'm going to go ahead and jump down to the next slide, which gives you some contact information, and turn it back over to you.
Wow. That's awesome. With 2 minutes to spare. There are no other questions in the queue, so I'll give folks a moment. One thing people were asking for a copy of today's deck because this is great information, and of course you will get an email with a link to the recording later on. So please email me if you have my email address, kim.peterson@InterDyn BMI, or go ahead and user experiences at InterDyn BMI. They both come to me. And also, just so you know, Sandy is a consultant, and so if you would like her to dig in and help you in taking advantage of some of these tips, she is available, so you can always get in touch with Sandy as well. So thank you, Sandy, so much for teaching us more about GP. Any last comments before we let folks go?
Nope, I look forward to seeing you all at GPUG Summit in Tampa.
Excellent.
Have
Awesome.
a great day.
Thank you, everybody.